TGO, Tom Gruenwald Outdoors, is brought to you in part by HT Premium Ice Tackle, Polar Fire Gear. This is how it's done. Vexilar, ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. And Tourism Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing.
Hello everyone and welcome to Tom Gruenwald Outdoors. I'm Tom Gruenwald. You know, for the second or third year in a row, it's mid-December, and you get down in my area, about 45 miles north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The weather's been kind of mild. We had a little bit of ice started. It got warm, it rained, we lost the ice, and so I've had to follow the ice and the cold weather north. And I'm up here in the Cable Ashland area. I was fortunate enough to run into Aaron Castern of Unlimited Trophy Outfitters. And Aaron said, Tom, hey, we've got a base, we got some ice started. If you're interested, why don't you come up here? And we got kind of a good situation going on. You're on some panfish up here.
Yeah, we've been running an average for the last few days. That's been safe ice to get on in that 7 to 8 inch range. We've been getting some 9s and a little bit better mixed in there too with a few crappies. So it's been a good bite. It's been holding well for us.
Okay, and we got a classic situation. We're fishing some shallower, weedy bays, been undisturbed. There's fish concentrated here.
Nobody's been in here. We're basically the first people on first ice this year, and we're working in that 6 to 8, 6 to 9 inch range in the fresh, you know, the green cabbage, what's left in there yet. So there's good oxygen, and it's holding the fish tight. You know, you got to work around a little bit to find the open pockets to drop in. But once you get into them, you're getting fish, and it's staying steady. You know, again, there's a few smaller ones mixed in, but as the average is running that 7 to 8 inch range, and so there's some nice pike out around the areas too. So a lot of opportunity right now.
Absolutely. You gotta love first ice. For me, you know, it's you hear all the classic Christmas songs going right now, and it is the most wonderful time of the year when you get the news that you can finally get out here on the lake.
Yes.
And you know, a point I'd like to make too. You're talking about me driving up this way to try to find ice. You can stay on first ice, actually, for several weeks if you play things out correctly. Okay, I had to drive 5 or 6 hours to get up here into this Cable Ashland area to find ice, but by and large, another week from now, I'll bet you I could probably travel 20, 30 miles south of here and be on that same 4 or 5 inches of ice. Go the next weekend, it comes a little further south. So you can actually kind of follow that first ice period. You can stay on active fish and a great bite like this for quite a while if you play things right and you've got the time you want to invest it. So anyway, we're going to get out here. Aaron and I are going to give this a shot, see if we can run into some of those nice bluegills. Well, we moved out, classic first ice situation. We've got a shallow, weedy bay here. It's running anywhere from about, I'd say somewhere around 5 to 7 feet. What we've found is a number of scattered bluegills in this area. We're marking them. Fish have been running right around, the 7-inch mark, 7.5 inch on the average. But we're seeing a few bigger red marks down there. So what the trick here is to move around a lot. And I got with that little velocity drill and the cordless drill on the top of it, we can go out here and with only 4 or 5 inches of ice like we have right now, we can pop a lot of holes quickly. We just keep moving around. We use the sonar, we check, see if we've got some good weed cover down there, look for fish, and then we'll get into a hole. And typically, the fish are pretty active. The first drop down there, you can catch a fish, maybe 2, then things will slow down a little bit. And you just keep moving and hole hopping. The strategy I like to use, since especially we're in kind of shallow water here, when you drill those holes, of course you bring the flighting out, it'll kind of ting, ting, ting on the sides of the ice, makes a little bit of noise. So what I like to try to do is get out and drill as many of the holes in the area I think are going to hold fish as I possibly can, check with the sonar, see what's down there, and then just let things settle and just start moving around with the rods and the sonar and see what we can find. I've got a couple of fish down here. I caught a smaller one earlier, and I think what I'm going to do is just do a little hole jumping here, start moving around. Aaron's going to try the same thing. We'll see if we can get some of these bluegills to go.
There's more fishing action to come right here on TGO.
All right. Well, I think we're finally starting to figure out these fish a little bit here. There's a lot of decent sized fish, like 7 to 8 inches down there, and we're marking some bigger red marks. just got to kind of stay on them. You know, one of the things that I'd like to talk about a little bit is actually the jigging cadence that you use when you're working these fish. And what I mean by cadence is how you work your lure. You know, here I'm seeing a lot of fish down there. Ironically, kind of a unique situation. I'm getting the fish to come up and follow the bait, and they're looking at it and they'll follow it up 2 or 3 feet. And ordinarily, when you get that kind of activity, they will bite. You can make them go. That hasn't been the case. They're not following up real aggressively and hitting. They're just kind of chasing the bait. So another unique situation, and the most important thing when you're out in ice fishing today, you know, with the better sonar that we have, you can really follow and monitor the activity level of these fish. What's turning them on? Okay, is it a lot of motion? Is it jigging up? In other words, is it trying to bring your bait upward when they're biting? Are you better off to try working the bait down to get them to trigger? Sometimes holding the bait completely still as opposed to moving it at all is what'll trigger the fish. And then you got combinations, okay? Like right now where I'm jigging this bait up real hard and real aggressively and they're coming up on it. Actually getting them to bite, I don't want to keep moving. I have to actually kind of slow it down a little bit, pause, wait, and that's the point that those fish are hitting it. So it's a combination of getting them going, bringing the fish up today, and then pausing for a second to try to get the strike. It's that combination that's working, and every day is different, and every situation is different. You never know what you're going to have to do. But if you watch me working this bait now, I took it down so about 6 inches off the bottom, I wiggle a little bit, and then I'm going to start working the bait up, and I'm shaking that rod tip pretty aggressively. And that action like that with that dancer seems to be getting the fish to come up. I got one looking right now. And then it seems like if I pause like that, that's when the fish are hitting. And it's just about every single time. And once I get that down, I figure out how that's working, I just lost that fish. But as I figure out how that's going and that's what's triggering those fish, all of a sudden I'm catching fish regularly instead of just sitting there and watching and worrying about what I got to do to catch the fish. I mean, these sonar units are so helpful in just being able to pattern and trigger and learn what's going to help you catch more and more fish. And you can see now too, between Aaron and I, we both got this thing down. We're starting to get on them. All right. Well, I was here starting to get depressed because every fish I'd caught so far was on that Marmuska tungsten dancer. That's what they seem to want. So, well, I'm just going to go and try a regular Marmuska. I've had several bluegill outings now here last winter when I started fishing with these tungstens, where I put that dancer down there and I work some fish. And it seems like once they get a little more active, so far the other fish down there get a little more competitive, and then I can use something else, try a different jig. So I put on a little standard Marmuska tungsten right there. And it's a chartreuse with the zebra stripes on it. Again, tungsten is denser than lead, it's heavier, it shows up better on sonar, it still gets down fast. Now the difference here is, of course, I've got a standard fixed hook. It's more of a regular jig. It doesn't have that little dropper chain on it like the dancer does. You know, I'm not sure what it is, but again, a lot of times if I take a special jig like that dancer with that little dropper chain on it, kind of start working, get the fish going, get them feeding, it seems to turn the rest of the school on. Maybe they get a little more competitive or something, but once those fish get a little more aggressive and a little more active, then you can switch over and use some other style jigs, and that seems to be the case again today. There we are. Classic. Just a average size bluegill. Nothing wrong with that. These are nice, fat, well-conditioned fish. There he is. We keep fishing here now, kind of midday. Action slowed a little bit. I think as the light fades, even though it's overcast, we get into that prime bluegill time. You know, I get to mid-afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock, whatever. I think we'll start hitting some bigger fish. Hey, we'll just keep trying, see if we can catch some more bluegills right after this. Moved over here to another hole. Again, I'm just trying to hole hop. Sometimes just 10 or 15 or 20 feet can make a big difference. For some reason, you go and you catch a few fish out of a hole, and then they'll tend to spook a little bit. You'll still see some fish, they'll still follow, they might come up, they're not biting as hard. Oftentimes, when you go into a fresh hole, that's where you'll pick a fish up. So you want to come out and you talk about, hey, we did really well. We caught 20 real nice bluegills out there today. Most of the time, it's not just going and drilling a single hole and sitting out and catching them. You'll pick up a fish or two in multiple holes. So I recommend moving around a lot. Use that sonar to your advantage. Make sure that you're seeing weeds down the bottom that are holding those fish. If you got a good sonar unit like you can here with these Vexillars, I can actually see the weeds and I can see fish down amongst those weeds. And then by using these heavier tungsten jigs, I can get right down into those weeds and work those fish. So I got fish looking right now, and of course the trick is just trying to figure out what it is that's going to make them hit. Now there I had been working the bait fairly aggressively, and when I stopped, I had one kind of pop it. So that's kind of a hint that maybe I need to slow things down a little bit. Aaron, hey, what you got going there? That looks like a nice fish. That's taking some drag. Oh yeah, you need some help there? You got him.
We'll see.
That looks like a nice fish.
Yeah.
That's a tiny, tiny dancer with a number 16 epoxy treble. And that bigger pike hit it. That's fun on that light line. Nice job. Nice job.
That's all right.
Just wanted to kind of show everybody the sonar here and what we're doing. We're at about 6.5 feet of water. This is my bottom mark right here. If you look on this, we're on the 0 to 20 foot scale, which is this yellow dial. So you can see we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Here's 6 feet, here's 7 feet, and we're right in between that. So we're about 6.5 feet deep. This is my top. That's under the ice. What I'm seeing here is either fish that are way over on the outside of the cone, suspended, or more likely it's some kind of plankton, maybe small bait fish or something like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my lure down in here. I got this tungsten jig, so the nice thing about this is it really shows up pretty well on sonar because it is denser than lead. Now if you watch from the top of the screen here, you're going to see that's my jig that I'm dropping down, that orange mark, and there it goes. And it turns red because it's right in the center of the cone here. And I'm going to bring that down there. Now you can see it wiggling. And I'm going to drop that right down to the bottom. Now I'm going to lift it off the bottom. You see that mark right here. This is my jig, and I've got that set so it's just showing up as kind of a green or an orange mark. I turned the gain or the sensitivity down just so I can see my jig. And of course, if a fish moves in, which is going to be substantially bigger than the jig, it's going to show up very clearly. And anything that's a bigger mark like a fish presumably should come in and should be a nice bright red mark, so it'll be easy to tell when a fish moves in there. There's a fish off of the bottom. That bottom just jumped a little bit. And the trick here is when you're working these, of course, see if you get him to come up, and there he comes. Now you got my jig up here moving, and I see that red mark, that's a fish just below the jig. He's coming to check it out. And then it turned from red to orange to green, and that's just simply a signal that the sonar pulse that was hitting that fish, it got the fish as it came in, it got darker and darker, redder and redder, because it was right in the center of the cone, and then faded off to orange and green as he kind of swam away from the bait. So I can tell that the fish are moving toward my bait or they're moving away from the bait. Of course, the thing I really want to try to do is get one of these fish to come up off the bottom, chase the lure, and hopefully that big red mark from the fish meets the bait. That's really all there is to it. And at that point, I can watch all those fish react to my presentation. I can see like this one here that's coming up off the bottom now. Will he come charging up real hard on it? If I lift the bait up like this, will he follow? Does he stay low? Do I have to jig just above him? What kind of motions do I need to create to trigger that fish to come and hit my bait? That's the trick. We just moved out here a little bit deeper, and I grabbed this Polar Fire Professional. This is a light action rod, so a little bigger guides. Still got some sensitive tip action, but it's a little heavier. And this is 2-pound test instead of that 3/4 pound sewing thread I was using earlier. And now I put on just a tad bigger jig. And we moved out a little bit off the edge of the weeds. We've been marking quite a few smaller fish up in the weeds. They don't seem to be very active. And we came off here kind of on the weed line, or out on the edge, trying to hopefully see if we can find a few more active fish or maybe some bigger fish. Of course, when you start getting into those bigger bluegills, if you're using that really, really light line, you can get yourself into trouble, especially if you got weed cover down there like we do. So we go just a little bit heavier and see what that does. And it does make a difference in your presentation. It's not quite as fine-tuned when you got that smaller, like little dancer jig and that lighter line and the micro systems. You're certainly going to catch, in my opinion, more fish than you will when you jump up to a little lighter action system like this in the 2-pound test. But if we do get into some bigger fish and they're active, this does help me get a little better hook set. And of course, I can play those fish a little bit without having to worry quite so much about one having to break off on me.
More fishing action online at tgofishing.com.
There we go. We're here, Aaron. A better size. Oh. They really like this this little dancer. I tried some more standard marmuska jigs and some other types of things, and I just wasn't getting anywhere near as much interest as I am with this little dancer. But these fish are real funny. They're coming up real hard off the bottom, like they're real anxious to feed, and they're going to hit. And then when they get up on the bait, they're just kind of sitting on it and moving away again. So the trick now is to really use these electronics to our advantage and see what it takes to actually get these things to trigger to hit, not just to come up on the bait. And that's the advantage of today's sonar, is that you can play these fish, you can try different baits, you can watch how they respond to them, and then try to figure out what's going to help you catch the most fish. And again, I've tried just a real subtle approach, and sometimes just holding the rod tip still. Fish will bite on it. Now, what I'm finding right now is that it takes a pretty aggressive shake and work the bait up and try to get them excited, try to get them to come up for it. Now we're catching a couple of these smaller bluegills here on purpose. We're going to actually put these on our some tip-ups and stuff here. See if we catch some pike on them a little later. I'll just show you this little lure that I'm using here. This is the Marmuska Tungsten Dancer, and it's something that I developed with Shark Lures and HT Enterprises. And what's kind of neat, it's like a bullet-shaped tungsten body. It comes in either gold or silver. Then we got a little short chain link to a dropper. It's a little epoxy treble hook. You got that little colored treble hook, and then we just got a waxworm kind of clumped on there. What's nice is that tungsten body goes down fast, gets down to where the fish are, and then once I get in that area, I start working it, I can let that little chain and that little epoxy dropper work real lightly. If they come up there and they just nip lightly at it, that hook's not affixed so tight to the heavy lure body, and that'll hook them, whereas a lot of times a fixed hook on a solid jig won't. And again, just using very light line. I've got actually a 3/4 pound sewing thread on here. Now you see it, tungsten went right straight down. I'm in about 6 feet of water here. I got right back down to where the fish are on the bottom. Worked it kind of aggressively. Again, kind of just hesitated a second and boom, he hit it. So kind of coming into a pattern here, figuring out what it is that's going to make these fish bite. And just look, you see where that tungsten lure is? That body that I just showed you is out of his mouth, and it's the little hook that he went and grabbed and was able to hit right away.
Ooh, baby, this is a big gill.
You got a good one?
Yeah, this is a good one.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, that's a nice gill right there.
That's it. Look at that. That's what we came here for. Right there, right there. All day long. All day long. Yep. Fish between 7, 7.5, 8 inches long. All of a sudden the light starts to drop a little bit, the activity picks up, and now we get that big one. All right, what do you want to guess that fish at?
I got it. He's got to be close to 9.
I think so.
Yeah, that's a
To say you're right. Let's look.
nice fish right there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Tip of the snout to the tail is almost right on 9 inches, maybe a little bit better. That's a beautiful fish.
It is.
That's what it's all about. That's what we came out here for.
You betcha.
Aaron, I just want to say thank you. It's been a great day. I mean, we came out here, we averaged 7.5, 8-inch gills. We caught a number of smaller fish. Here we got one that's 9, and we probably still got a good half an hour yet too on the ice. We might get another one.
A few more.
Who knows? I think we're going to stick it out. Hey folks, I just want to thank Aaron right here from Unlimited Trophy Outfitters for taking us out on this first ice adventure. I hope you guys get a chance to get out on the ice here and catch a few first ice gills as well. We'll see you again next time on Tom Gruenwald Outdoors.
TGO has been brought to you in part by HT Premium Ice Tackle, Polar Fire Gear. This is how it's done. Vexilar. Ice fishing begins when you turn your Vexilar on. And Tourism Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan, Canada's best freshwater fishing. TGO, where it's all ice fishing all the time.